Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Coming on in here. Welcome, welcome. As people are coming in, we are going to get started here in just a moment for our webinar on the Recreational Trails Program. So this is the webinar that will go over the materials, and just to lay a little bit of groundwork first, during the session today, we will be using the chat. So at any point today, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. We might pause at a couple points through to collect those questions. And if we don't get to them during the main part of the webinar today, we will get to them at the end of the day. So you will at the end of the session. So we are here for at least an hour to do this. We are open to going forward. We do ask that during the bulk of the meeting, you do stay on mute, just in case there's, keyboard clicks or the dog barking. I know microphones usually don't pick that up, but we do ask that just so it's for the ease of everybody's audio. And when it's you have that opportunity to ask those questions, you're welcome to either put them in the chat or speak them verbally at that point if you'd like. We are recording today's webinar so that it will be available for everyone to see afterwards. It will be posted on our website as well as emailed to you at the end. And also, if you were one of the folks who got caught, there was apparently Teams was having some feelings today about how well the registration link was working. We had a group of people where Teams just didn't decide it was going to do that. So if you were caught in that link registration error, thank you for your perseverance and glad that you made it here today. So thank you so much. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lauren Pyle. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Outdoor Recreation Grants Manager for the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. I'm joined today on the webinar by two of our grant staff. We have Joe Kill, who's here, who is helping with our tech pieces and components. If you have any issues, please feel free to reach out. And then Marlena Baker, who will also be presenting later today. So we're going to get started, and what we're going to be covering today is the content of the pre-application. So we're going to go through each of the components piece by piece, offering tips, tricks, resources, and ideas to help you be successful in developing your pre-application package for the Recreational Trails Program. If you were here today thinking about project planning or design or overall project eligibility, those are not on the docket for today's webinar because those were on the previous webinar, which the link is available on our website. So we encourage you to check that out, but you're still welcome to stay today to learn the forms. So we're going to go through each form piece by piece. What does it mean? And then have time for Q&A at the end. And before we even get into that, want to focus just briefly first of why do we even have this pre-application phase? Doesn't it just feel like an extra step? And for us, we really don't think of it that way. This is our opportunity to screen projects as the grant staff. We're going to be screening for project eligibility, feasibility, readiness, and compliance with the federal requirements before you all invest time and effort on the full application. So we're checking project concept just to make sure it's a fit for the program. Is a huge piece because we want to save you that effort if for any reason your project is not a fit for the RTP program. The other reason we do this and why we have picked the materials that we have at this point is to be able to provide you with feedback to help you submit a stronger application. We recognize that RTP applications and pre-applications come from a wide range of applicants with such huge backgrounds. We get everything from, large municipalities and nonprofits who have full-time grant writers on staff. They have full-time trail professionals, to the other end of the spectrum where we're working with all volunteer town commissions or small, all volunteer-led nonprofits. And our goal through having this pre-application process is to provide everybody with information so that we can really evaluate the quality of your proposal, not just the quality of the materials that you submit at the end during the final selection. And so we're going to dig into those materials. We're going to start with the 3 that are for all projects. So every single RTP project that's submitted is going to submit a pre-application form, a work plan, and a budget. Those are core materials for everybody. And so we're going to start with a pre-application form. This form is a fillable PDF that is where you'll provide a lot of the basic information about your program. There's a section about the applicant, like who is the entity that is applying, the municipality, the nonprofit. Who should we contact about the application? This is just the person that we're going to reach out to say, yes, your application has been selected to move forward and submit a full, a full program. And I see a comment in the chat that I am frozen for some people. Are other people experiencing that, Joe or Marlena?
No,
Nope,
not on our end.
Nope. Okay. So Shelly, it looks like it might be your internet, unfortunately. But this will be recorded, so you'll be able to catch back up. Thank you. I just wanted to do that tech check there in case it was for everybody. Going back to the form, it's the applicant information. Again, this is the application contact is the person who we should follow up with about feedback and results of the pre-application submission, saying, yes, you're invited to move forward and here's your feedback, or your project has been declined for these reasons because it's not eligible for the RTP program. So that person that should really be the person we're reaching out to about the application itself, not about the project. You'll give us the project contacts later on. So this is just the application contact. The fillable form for the pre-application form also includes project information, things like the title, the location, what track you're applying for, what kind of project is it, give us a short, sweet description of it, and what kind of trails are going to be involved in that, or trail use for education or equipment. And then the last section that we have is generally about the landowner permission. And so it's just us as a check-in. You don't actually provide us with landowner permission documentation, but we want to know about like what types of landowner information do you need? Like, are you doing projects on land that your town or your nonprofit owns? Is it on a partner's land? Is it on private land? Or is it not a construction project at all? And therefore landowner permission does not apply because it's not construction or maintenance. So you'll get to fill us out that high level information for us about the project. And it really is a click the boxes type of option. So you'll go through all of those pieces on the form. The last sort of new question that we're adding this year on the pre-application form is your unique entity identifier, or UEI. And we want to know about the status of that in the pre-application form. And so if you don't know already, you can go find that status at sam.gov. But we're looking to understand, like, does your organization or entity have an active registration, an inactive registration, an ID assigned, or have you applied for it, but you're still waiting to hear back? Or have you not yet requested it? Pro tip, if you're anything other than active registration or ID assigned, start the process to remedy that now. Those are the only 2 options that are going to be accepted from in the full application, because you will need that number in the full application. And sam.gov does take time to process. So if your registration is inactive, it's a good thing to check and start the renewal now. If you've applied for it, great, like get that application in. And if you have not yet requested it, we encourage you to go for the applied stage. So that is what we're looking for with that question. And we just talked about that piece, is you need the active or the ID assigned during the full application phase. So that's the form. The next document that everyone will need to submit is a work plan. And this is in Microsoft Word. It is a table, but it's in Microsoft Word, which means it should be compatible with Google Docs. It should be compatible with Pages in the Apple products, or whatever word processing software you use. And so it is in table form. There's a spot to fill it out. And with that work plan, you will be outlining, basically, this is your space to test, like, what are you doing? Who is going to do it? What is the result of that activity going to be? And when is it going to happen? And so you're trying to put these in logical buckets so that you have the spaces of like different steps are there. We know what's understanding. So we know what you're doing for the work. And if you have different activities where you're like, well, this is going to have different people or different equipment or different timelines, we want to separate those out on each line of the work plan. The biggest piece that we see in the work plan, though, sometimes in the pre-application phase, is people saying, well, I've already picked my trail building company. I've already picked my engineer. So I'm just going to say, you know, such and such engineering company is going to do the wetlands delineation. No, you are not allowed to name specific contractors in your grant application. If you are a town that's working with a nonprofit partner or an unaffiliated partner where it's not a business, it's not anything like that. Like if it's a partnership of organizations, you can say like, yes, organization A is doing this work. Our partner organization B, who is an integral part of this project, is doing that. But if it is work that can or should be contracted out, you can just say a contractor will do this, a professional specialist, talking those generalities rather than naming specific individuals. And as you're building out your work plan, you can think about this in a lot of ways, but one of the ways we often think is like, what are the phases that you're in? Like, do you have surveying, design, or engineering activities that are going to happen first? Wetlands delineations often fall in that, if that's something that's going to be required for your project. Permitting, like going through that process of, are there any permits that you need to apply for and go through that? When are your plans to do any bids, quotes, or final budgeting? You know, if you have an extended RFP process, put that on your timeline for your work plan. What are the different construction activities? If there are construction activities or phases within that, you know, you might say one line for bridge, one line for the water bars, one line for trail tread maintenance. We want to put those in cohesive buckets of things if your project includes multiple items. And then if you're having any events or site visits or anything like that, you can call those out separately. And when we're thinking about that timeline for RTP, with that, you know, we're in the pre-application phase now. Those are due November 21st. Then selection, your full applications, if you're invited to move forward, will be due February 1st. We'll review those final proposals from February to March. And then starting in April is when we really dig into grant agreement development. And so as part of our process, like after you've been selected, that is when we seek authorization from the Federal Highway Administration, which is the funder for RTP for projects. And that is an important piece because we have to wait for federal highway authorization before any work that is going to be funded by RTP can start. So there are opportunities for eligible pre-award planning and permitting as match only. Once the federal highway authorization comes through, if your project is required to have an archaeological resource assessment or an ARA, which is generally needed for new trails, it can be needed. I shouldn't say generally. It can be needed for new trails or major reroutes, new construction, basically anything that is working outside of the established footprint. That can start after federal highway authorization comes through for it to be reimbursable. And for all other project implementation pieces, everything else in the work plan that is not, not pre-award planning and permitting that's match and not the required archaeological resource assessment, if that applies to you, that we would tell you when you're allowed to start. Everything else must wait until the designated project implementation period, which for this year's RTP is July 13th of 2026. That's when we expect projects to be able to start. And then you have the rest of that field season as well as all of the next year. You have until December 31st of 2027. And so we share this so that you can right size your work plan based on that roughly 18-month window for implementing the projects. And as you're building your work plan together, as I said, that is that Microsoft Word piece, we recommend that you break it into steps. So you use bullets. If anyone happens to know of the show, The Great British Baking Show, one of the jokes we have to make is your work plan should not read like a technical challenge in that show, where it is very basic, slimmed down directions, and you watch people who have amazing expertise struggle to figure out what's happening. That is the whole premise of that component of the show. We get work plans that are that way, right? Like people come in with work plans. You have the trail expertise. You need to have that work plan be understandable by someone who is not you, or someone who doesn't have the same number, like the same familiarity with your site, with your activities. Like make sure it reads logically to someone else. And so to do that, you should include all the steps in timeline order and make those descriptions clear. If you're going to use an acronym, make sure you spell it out the very first time you use it. Because sometimes acronyms might mean different things in different places. Like we saw one just the other day where it was an acronym for a trail name, but it was the same acronym that might be used in a business office setting for something completely differently. And so we were all confused how this business form was going to be used in trail work. So it's a great opportunity that way to like make sure everyone's on the same page, that if the trail name is going to be abbreviated as these 3 letters, what do those 3 letters mean from the get-go? And so just try to make it read clearly that way. And in the work plan, there is a space for you to separate RTP project work from complementary work. And as we're thinking about that, it's the final column on our new template this year. We have that in there because there are things where you're like, look, I know this is not eligible for RTP. Maybe that's like you already did site work that's happening this year, right? Like pre-award construction is not eligible for match or reimbursement. Not eligible, but like you're like, we already did site prep for this. And I want the ranking committee to know. The work plan template does have functionality within that. So you can tell people that like this is work that's already done, or maybe you have marketing work that you want to plan to do, or any other activity that would be ineligible for RTP. By using that, is it for RTP or complementary work column, it helps us call out that you're like, look, I know this is not eligible. I know it's not a fit, so that when we get your, say your work plan, you're like, I did all my site work in summer 2025. We don't panic and go, oh no, that project's not a fit for the timeline. It's not eligible because of the timeline. When you're saying, nope, it's complementary work, it's outside of the project, then we all know that and we can all move forward in a great and happy way. So we know when it's happening. Likewise, we've had applicants in the past who want to show how this RTP project, right, because they do max out at that $50,000 ask for non-motorized projects. They want us to show how that project is part of a bigger system, right? Like this project might be part of a $300,000 trail network revival, and they want the ranking committee to know that. The work plan, that complementary workspace, is your opportunity to share how this is part of that bigger picture, if you would like. You are not required to share any complementary work. You're not required to do that. If you only want to tell us this is the RTP project, great. Then that was what we can look at to say, yep, we know everything in there is eligible, feasible, and fits within RTP. Check. So we can do that. So the complementary work is only as an option if you'd like to. We just have in the past found that there are many applicants who want to share how it fits into that bigger frame. So that's why we offer that as an opportunity to make it clear that you know what fits for RTP and not just like we do. It makes it easier all around. And at the end of the pre-application guidance, if you're sitting going, okay, she's talking about this in a lot of theoreticals, like what does this actually look like? At the end of the pre-application guidance, at the very end, we actually have an example built out. It is a completely theoretical example. It is not a real project, but you can see how we built out like that kind of language and the types of descriptions we're looking for as a helpful piece. The last common piece with the work plan template that I want to get into is that if you go, I'll go back. Whoops, here we go. Here is a column, as you can see here, for our anticipated results. Like what is the thing that you can list that we can measure that will happen at the end of that step? And there has been confusion about this in the past, so we want to address and kind of give you some tips about it. So the anticipated results should be ideally something that is measurable, either because like check, it is complete, or because like you're maintaining 1.2 miles of trail. Like there's a distance or a length or a dimension or like a number of water bars. It is the measurable thing. And if you're like unsure of what that can be, use framing language to show that that number is an estimate. You know, if you're going to say, this project will clean out 6 to 8 water bars, put that in there if you're not sure what it is. Or we're going to do at least 100 feet of boardwalk. Or we're going to do up to a certain number of activities and events for educational projects. So you can put those quantifiers in, but that's what we're looking for in the work plan is some sort of like measurable results at the end of the day. And we also know that not every activity has one of these anticipated results. Like it won't always result in an action. So if there's not a logical connection there of like, what will the end product be? You don't have to put one in there. You know, like one we've had in the past when people are like, but I'm preparing the RFP and getting town approval. Maybe your anticipated result is town approval on the RFP secured. Great. That's your step. It is like the check mark that it happened, but there might not also be a measurable step. Like if you're just saying, I will have prepared the RFP, there you go. We have seen it there. We don't need that as a measurable step at the end for that anticipated result. And our guidance does provide a lot of examples of what this is. And so I just encourage you to think of like, what is the thing at the end of this step that will have a number associated with it or a checkbox associated with it to be like, yep, we did it. That is how anyone can know we have finished this step. So those are the types of things that we're looking for. And actually, before I go on, that was the work plan and the form. I haven't seen any questions in the chat that have not yet been answered. Does anybody have any questions about the work plan? All right, well, we can keep going and we will come back at the end if you've got more. Because next up, we're going to go to the budget, right? This is the last of the documents that everyone will need to submit. And this one, yes, it is a table, but it is in a spreadsheet. So this should be something that we've provided in Excel, but if you have Google Sheets or Microsoft Numbers, it should be, or sorry, Apple Numbers, to be able to operate there. And so it is a table that we have provided you with. And within your budget, as you're putting it together, this is the space that really is going to help build your ask. As you're preparing your budget, we recommend that you are thorough, detailed, and accurate, that you have included your best estimate of all the costs that are associated with the project that you're going to be proposing. So with this, some of the common expense types that we see submitted are things for engineering and design, permitting, the archaeological resource assessment, if you're building, again, that new trail. There's a whole section in the pre-application guidance. I'm like, how do I know if I need an ARA? There is a chunk in there actually in the budget section that will help prompt you to say, like, you might need one. And if you might need one, we recommend you put it in the budget. Because if it's in the budget and you don't need it, we will let you revise your budget when we get to the grant agreement phase. But if you need one and you don't have it, you're going to have to come up with that money somewhere. And those generally cost about $3,500. So we always recommend like see the guidance on that one. We've realized that guidance is pretty dialed in based on what the recommendations that come out of our federal reviewers are, because that whole purpose is for federal compliance as related to the National Historic Preservation Act. So see that guidance and make sure, like, if you might need it, just add it into your budget so it's there. I also like to call out that project administration and grant administration are eligible costs, whether that is being done by staff or a contractor or a volunteer who's going to provide that time as match. You can't just magically pay volunteers or include that for reimbursement if a volunteer is the one contributing the time. But if you're going to pay staff or have that time there, those are eligible costs, as well as all of your construction costs, labor, tools, material, equipment, publications, research and design for those. The biggest thing that we see on budgets, other than those, those eligible costs of people building those out, are that ineligible costs cannot be used for match. Only eligible costs can be used for match. So as I said, like labor is allowed. So you can use volunteer time as match. If it is for an eligible activity, but marketing is one that we commonly see. People are like, I'm going to promote it on the website and we're going to do an event and it's going to be all these things. And that's fabulous and amazing that you are doing that work, and it is not eligible for RTP. So you can't count it as match. That would be a great opportunity for that complementary work, and it just doesn't go in your budget. Your budget should only be your RTP project. The other question we often get about budget planning is like, well, how much can I ask for as an applicant? Well, we've given guide rails on recommended amounts for like mins and maxes for the project. Please see webinar 1 for all of those details because it varies by track for that. But one of the other pieces that we want people to really think about is that RTP is a reimbursement grant. That is how it functions. The grantee, whoever the applying entity is, the main grantee, who will be the one getting the grant agreement and signing it with us, is the one who has to front the costs for the project. And then they submit a reimbursement to the state for reimbursement. Those reimbursements in general can happen once a quarter. So once every 3 months. We don't say, well, it's been February, so your next one is due on this month. It's not like blocked by certain times. It is literally like 3 months from the date you submitted last is when our threshold is. We do make sometimes one-time exceptions for that if there is a very justifiable reason. We've had projects in the past where like, cool, all of the, the money had to go to, particularly we see this for bigger projects and other programs, but we had to drop $25,000 on the down payment on the bridge, and it's out of cycle with our normal reimbursements. And it's because of a huge one-time expense that is too much for our organization, our municipality to carry for cash flow reasons. We do make exceptions to our reimbursement cadence on a case-by-case basis for that. But generally we stick to those 3-month cadences, those 3-month windows. And so as you're building your budget, we strongly encourage you to think about like, what is the reasonable cash flow that your nonprofit or your town can carry, and think about that as you're right sizing your project for your application. We also want you to know that as you're thinking about budget, is that different costs are going to result in needing to provide different documents at the end of the day. Because for RTP grants, anytime, if you're selected for a grant, you submit for that reimbursement, you are required to submit documentation of all expenses. So for direct expenses, this could be things like copies of invoices, labor report forms, timesheets, but it could also be things like volunteer sign-in forms or other federally accepted timekeeping methods. If it's a donation of time or services from another provider, say you have a survey company in town who's willing to do your survey for free or at a discounted rate, like you need to get a signed survey form on that. So you really have to have that. And so we tell that to you in advance so you can think about maybe what that means for your administration efforts on this, or like what types of costs you want to do. We also want to flag for RTP that equipment has a magical threshold and means a very specific thing. So if you are buying hand tools, a chainsaw, hard hats, those are tools, those are supplies. That is not equipment as far as RTP is considered. RTP considers equipment as a single value item that is over $10,000. And at that point, there are additional requirements that get tripped into place. And so it's that single value item over $10,000. And generally, it's an item that could be moved, right? Like if you are going to buy the $30,000 like mobile pavilion and it's going to be assembled on site, that is going to be permanently fixed. It doesn't generally trip. It's more like a construction equipment piece, like a construction expense, not an equipment expense. But RTP as a program has funded things like trailers in the past for trail maintenance programs across the nation. Other people have bought, heavy machinery with this program. And so know that $10,000 is the magic number for budgeting for equipment. And there are specialty restrictions that come into place if you apply for equipment. Please see the pre-application guidance for those full details. The last piece with the financial documentation requirements as you're thinking about budget is that there is a difference in staff versus contractors. And you're like, who is going to do this work? From our perspective as the state and as the funder, like once you get a grant agreement, we want professionals who are skilled within the role and have the knowledge and experience and expertise and credentials right for the project to be the ones who are doing the job. But if you're thinking about, well, that could be our staff or it could be a contractor, we just want to know there's a little bit of difference between that and what you have to do, because both are eligible, but the documentation is different. So if you ultimately end up working with a contractor for RTP, you have to solicit multiple competitive quotes and then ultimately get an invoice for the expense. Like that is what you'd have to keep on file, is your effort to solicit those quotes and the invoices and the associated with the cost. For staff, it's a little bit different, right? Like you don't have to say like, well, even if you're hiring staff to fulfill a role, you don't have to give us the whole process. You should keep that for your own records of how you got to hiring that person. But what we need at the end of the day would be a labor report, which is an itemized description of the time spent on the project. We spent 4 hours in this block of time doing this activity. And we have examples of that in our grant administration guidance for that. So we need that part of what did you do on the project, this person, based on the person. And then we need sort of that timesheet of how many hours did they work. Sometimes you can just do this in one document or one form. Sometimes it takes more than one to pull it together. So that's sort of the conceptual planning of the budget. Once you get into the nuts and bolts of the spreadsheet of the budget, we do want to make sure as you're calculating your budget that every cost that you want to be a part of this project is included in the budget. If you come back to us, down the road and say, oh, I forgot to include the $10,000 for this activity, chances are we don't have that money left. We award every penny available to us each year. And so if it's not in the budget, we can't pay for it. So make sure all your costs are there. And that said, we ask that you round to the nearest dollar. So just nice whole numbers, because even at this point, these are estimates. Even if you priced gravel to the penny today with what the delivery fee would be, starting July 13th of next year, it is probably not going to be to the penny exactly the same. So there's no sense in distilling it that far. You can round to the nearest dollar. We also strongly recommend, there's a space in the budget for it, that you include a short description for each line that outlines how you got those costs. We have realized year over year with our review committees is that proposals that include this information generally don't raise nearly as many questions about the validity of their numbers as projects that do. And so this could be as simple as saying, it's the project manager, 45 hours at whatever an hour. Or it's gravel, this many tons at this many dollars per ton, plus this delivery fee is the estimate. It's some sort of explanation, because when you have that, you're like, I promise we need $50,000 for this. And people are going to be like, the review committee in the past, if they don't have that context, they start asking questions. Where did that number come from? What are they looking at? What is that information? But when you provide that information, it makes it really clear that you've done your due diligence and you're not just guessing at numbers. You've really planned this out in a strong and thoughtful way. As you're starting to build it, I know this is always the push and pull between our timing, your timing, requirements, right? Because we always say, do not sign a contract yet. But we recommend that as you're building your budget, you kind of pull from multiple estimates if you can. Don't just ask the one company that you are friends with to give you a rough number so that you can build your budget. because sometimes numbers vary a lot. And we actually often recommend like don't even budget for the low number, like budget for the mid or the higher number, because costs can change a lot over time. Like what if your favorite company who is half the price of the other companies, you know, your favorite provider decided they are done with winter and are moving to Arizona. You would not want to be in that position that you then don't have enough funds to actually find somebody else as an opportunity to do that work. So we recommend that you build your budget with multiple estimates if at all possible. And that you also plan for inflation within the budget lines. So RTP as a program doesn't like to see like, well, this is our contingency line because we don't fund contingencies. We don't fund that. But you're like, well, you know, if gravel was this price, we're going to assume that there's a 10% inflation over the year, or we're going to assume there's a 15% inflation. Like you can do that in your math and your explanations, and we encourage you to do that so that you end up with enough money at the end of the day to do your projects. So similar to the work plans in the budget template, do not name contractors. Instead, use more generic descriptions, you know, based on what it is. And you could reference like based on quote from something, but like don't budget for that company, if that makes sense. You know, the example I have is like contracted surveyor valued based on the quote from that company. Rather than just to say, well, this is ABC company surveying. We also recommend that you don't lump numbers together as best you can. We try to avoid flat rate estimates. So like try to separate out labor versus materials versus equipment, if that is a component within that. The same way, like make sure your match actually follows what you expect to be. We've seen people before, we're like 20% match in admin, that's where it goes. And that is also not helpful. Like make sure you put it in there. Speaking of the match, and I see the question in the budget, I want to come back to that, or the question in the chat about the budget. I want to pull that back in just a little bit, probably at the end, so I can pull up some more resources so you can even see some difference. But thank you for that question, Sarah. Recording match, thinking about how to calculate. So RTP requires a 20% match. That is 20% of the total project cost, which is your RTP ask plus your match makes the total project cost. It is okay if you have more match than that, but know whatever match you submit at the final application is the match that you will be held accountable to. We need you to meet whatever match is that you're pledging within that. Your match could be cash or it could be in kind. So that could be things like other federal grants, state funds, like local cash contributions, such as like town budget allocation, nonprofit budget allocation, could be private donations, it could be private foundation grants, can also be in kind or non-monetary donations. So like somebody's donating services, somebody's donating materials, somebody's donating the use of tools. And you can have your match, as I mentioned earlier, your planning and permitting expenses can be counted up to 18 months before the project implementation date. So we're saying, you know, you can look backwards roughly till January of 2025. So any costs incurred this year for planning and permitting would be eligible as match only. They are not for reimbursement, only for match. So that's how you calculate the match. The piece is how do you record it? In the budget template, there is a column that you can say, like on each of those lines, what is it covering? Like how much of that is match? And within this, you know, at this point in the pre-application, you don't have to tell us where the match is coming from. You can think about the budget form as just reporting the expenses. Like how is the match going to be expensed? Where the match is coming from, though, you will have to have an answer by the time we get to the full application phase. And that is provided actually in narrative form. You get to tell us like how much is coming from the various sources that you have, and is that match committed? Is it something you're still pursuing? Is it pending? You'll get to tell us all about that there. The last pieces about the budget are the indirect costs. So indirect costs, as I shared in our previous webinar, we want to call those out as eligible activities. And these are things that cannot be directly expensed to the grant in a reasonable manner. So this might be things like a portion of, if you have a town and you have somebody who's running payroll, right? Like you're not going to charge the portion of their payroll time that they are running payroll for the person who's doing RTP work to that. You're never going to get them to code their time that way. It's not how it works. The same way, like if you submit an invoice for processing and somebody in the finance division is the one paying the invoice, like they're not going to code their time to that project, most likely. It's things like that that are those indirect costs for this. And if you are going to claim indirect costs, which could be eligible for reimbursement or match, you have to put it in your budget. And you are able to either use the federal de minimis rate, which is 15% of direct costs. If your municipality or nonprofit does not have, or other governmental entity, I should say, I've been saying municipality and nonprofit, but other governmental entities are eligible as well. If you do not have one of these, a special indirect rate already, you get to use the 15% if you would like. If your municipality, nonprofit, or other governmental entity has what is called a NICRA, a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, we must use that in your budget if that is what you're going to do. And so those sometimes have provisions on like what types of costs to be eligible for, the totals, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have a NICRA, you need to use that. You cannot, like legally, you cannot use the 15% rate. You have to use that. So if you're not sure if your municipality, nonprofit, or other governmental entity has a NICRA, please go talk to your finance folks, just to see if that's something. If you routinely receive other federal funds other than RTP, there is a potential that you have one. If your experience with federal funds in the past has just been RTP in the past, you don't have one, because we have not pursued those as a department because of how we're set up. We haven't negotiated those, and they have to be renegotiated every 2 years. So I can say in the last 2 years, we have done none of those, and nor are we in the position to. If you're a motorized project, again, motorized projects do have the $50,000 cap is waived for motorized projects. If you're interested in pursuing the indirect rate, like please talk to us first, because once you get over a $50,000 project budget, things change in terms of the rules. We'd be happy to provide that in an additional basis. The last chunk of stuff I have about the budget is about specialty costs. And so I've touched on this before, like see that guidance, because if you're going to be digging or moving undisturbed soil in any way, just add $3,500 to your budget right now for an archaeological resource assessment. Volunteer time and effort can be used as match only, and those rates for volunteer services must be consistent with those paid for similar work by the applying entity. If you do not have an established volunteer rate, which most applicants for RTP do not, we recommend that you use the independent sector's value of volunteer time for the state of Vermont. And this is linked in the guidance. It's in the PowerPoint, which you will get afterwards. But if you have no idea how to value volunteer, if you have an established rate, that is what you need to use, right? Like the volunteer rate is like normally if we do a volunteer work crew, we would charge this many dollars for them to another entity. Like, cool, you have a rate. You must use the rate. But if you don't have one and you're just like, it's the people who show up to help on the trail work day, the independent sector's value of volunteer time. Independent sector is an independent non-governmental entity who is a watchdog that tracks that time overall. So you can use that number. And then the last specialty cost piece to share is that if you have any education components, whether your project is all education for RTP or whether it's just a subcomponent of the overall project, you're going to do a trailhead re-envisioning and you're going to build the kiosk, that's construction. You're going to regrade the parking lot, that's construction. You're going to put new signs in, that's construction. But you're going to pay somebody to redesign all the interpretive materials and the maps for the kiosk. That design work is education. Printing of the map to install it on the kiosk, construction. So just think about that. If you have any education costs, even if it's just like a part of your project, you need to split that out very clearly within the budget, because there are federal requirements about how much money we can spend out of our total apportionment on education, which is 5% of our total available money. And like the RTP budget, or like the work plan, we also, if you're like, this is great in theory, I want to see what it looks like, we have developed a mock-up synthetic budget that is available at the end of the pre-application guidance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marlena next to come to the questions about, or the materials that are only needed if you are doing a construction and maintenance project. So application form, work plan, budget, everybody. Construction, you need these 3 things.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm also throwing the list of materials in the chat. Yes, so I will be chatting about the project map, the design assessment tool for trails, and permit reports, all required for construction and maintenance projects. If you're uncertain of if you include these types of work in your project, then feel free to go back to the guidance, and also in the previous webinar we listed out this too. But to start us off, the project map is new this year for the pre-app phase. We are asking for this this year because we noticed that the quality of maps has impacted the selection by the ranking committee. So to be able to give more time to give feedback to you all between the pre-app and the full app, we're going to be asking for them sooner and help you build out some stronger maps for your full application. We are so essentially the map is really to show you like what work is happening and where it is happening. If there's anything related to construction or maintenance in your work plan, it should be on your map, making sure those 2 pieces do connect. Like I said, the map really should include kind of the work that is happening, and should not necessarily just be a general trail network map. It should be that like project site overview of the work. There is a list of items that need to be included in maps in the guidance, but we did want to call out that naming landowners on the parcels of where the work will occur is also required. So as you're building that out, just make sure you're labeling your maps with that information as well. If you have a mapping tool of your own, that's wonderful. You can definitely use that. But FPR does have a mapping tool called A&R Atlas. It is free to use. It can be used at any time. We do also have some guidance in a tutorial video about this as well. So if you're struggling to navigate this, there's some resources to use this tool also. On the next slide, I do have a example of what a map coming out of that tool actually looks like. Just in general, it's a quick snapshot of the ideal map that we would love to see in applications. Really, it's just showing, again, kind of what is happening where, and clearly shows what is being done. You can kind of take a look that there's a clear label for that trail tread maintenance versus the new staircase work. So it should just be a quick bird's eye view of what's happening, and then also a quick label of that landowner. The next piece is for the construction and maintenance projects. We will need a completed design assessment tool for trails, aka fondly known as the DAT. This tool is an update of last year's climate resilience risk form, so it will likely look very familiar to those who applied last year. But essentially, this tool should help you think critically about that long-term resilience for your project, and really just help you plan out a resilient project overall. In the form, there are 5 different sections. The first one is project context. So this should be information about where your project is located relative to other features in that project area. The second section is general design. So that is questions on what types of materials you're using, whether or not you have erosion prevention measures in place, and also details like steepness in that project area. If you have any water features, there are some questions to help identify where in proximity they are to your project area. There's also a section on ecological considerations, like invasive and endangered species, and then a few quick questions on visitor management, kind of how you're planning to maintain that. A few tips about the DAT. There is a separate guidance for the form. It does break down each question and gives a brief explanation and definitions for each of the questions to offer some context around kind of why we're asking the questions and how you can best answer them. We do suggest that the form is completed by the project manager or someone with technical expertise. There is a section in the form that asks for you to write down who helped you complete the form, just so that we as grant staff and the ranking committee knows kind of the knowledge base that went into filling out the form. Another quick tip is to get out and walk the trail itself to have that like boots on the ground familiarity with it. Ideally after rain, just to be able to assess a project in a vulnerable state to really understand any potential impacts. And then lastly, there are some unknown options in the questions, but we do ask to do your best to answer all of the questions. We will provide feedback on the form itself to prep for the full app, but just know if you have a lot of unknown answers selected, we will likely ask for you to kind of dig into those details and try to answer them the best you can. So you might as well try to get as many answers out from the get-go as possible. So this is a snapshot of the tool itself. Again, it probably looks very familiar if you worked with the climate resilience risk form last year. But overall, it's a pretty quick form functionally, just some checkboxes and a few blank short answer sections as well. Turning to permitting. So this is the last piece for folks who are submitting construction or maintenance projects. You will need to submit a PDF of the permit navigator results or project review sheet for your project. I'll get into a little bit more about what those tools are and which one to choose for your project. But a quick note, even if you do own the land or are working on an existing footprint, it is still required to submit some permitting reporting. It's required for all projects, so just keep that in mind. Also, there's plenty of information in the guidance about the permitting tools and also kind of the information and links that you need to navigate those. So there are two tools that you can use for permitting reports. The Permit Navigator is an online tool managed by DEC, and these are specifically for projects that take place on one site or location. It's an online tool, like I said. It can complete it at any time and is free for your use. It does generate results immediately once you complete the form. So just know that the PDF will be then generated, and you'll have to download that to be what you submit to us for your pre-application. Make sure that you are answering as many questions as possible, just so that it can generate the best results. Having as much information as it needs to give you the best answer to determine what permits are needed. Once those results come out, they will provide you with permit specialist information. So you will have to reach out to those folks directly. Completing this form doesn't necessarily mean that you obtain those permits. Just know that you'll have those contact information for the people you do need to reach out to.
Marlene,
And then yes.
if I can hop in, the permit navigator does spit out at the end of it a list of the potential permits you might need. So that's what it is. And so that's why those contacts are critical in understanding, like, will you actually need this permit or not to follow up with?
Right. Yeah. Yes, and then for the other tool, which is called the project review sheet, this is a little bit more involved, but is specifically for linear projects or large projects that span on multiple parcels. So this is, I think it might be a Word document, but it is a form that you submit directly to DEC staff for their review. It does take a little bit of time because there is staff involvement, so make sure you're starting that process now. We usually suggest to start this at least 1 month before the deadline. So would be something that you'd want to get on pretty shortly. Also know that it's a little bit similar to the permit navigator in that you'll need to get that report from DEC as what you'll be submitting to us for your pre-app. Please do not submit your form directly to us without DEC reviewing it. Otherwise, we won't really have the information that we need for permits. Just a quick look at how permitting works. Like Lauren said, once you complete the results will determine potential permits that you'll need. So make sure you're calling and reaching out to those permit specialists. If they do determine that you do need those permits, please make sure you get some estimates and add that information to your work plan and budget for the full app. Alluding to what Lauren said earlier about the work plan and budget, if it's not in your budget or work plan, it will not be reimbursable for RTP. Just some other information. Know that the reports for both the permit navigator and the project review sheet, they are only generating state level permits. So make sure you're reaching out to your town for those municipal permit requirements. ARAs are not included in the results for either of those tools too. So make sure you're putting that in your work plan and budget as well, if you think you need one. And make sure you're contacting those DEC experts directly for next steps to determine if you do need those permits or not. In terms of timeline, just know that the permitting process does take about 3 to 6 months, maybe longer. So keep that in mind as you're planning things out. Also, one piece, you are allowed to begin permitting, but that would have to be a match only expense. If you want reimbursement for the permitting, you must wait until you have a signed grant agreement with us if you want it to be reimbursed. And then also, once again, make sure you're including the permitting information in that work plan and budget. Get those estimates as soon as you can so you're not surprised by those down the road. And also, as long as they're in the budget, RTP will cover them. In terms of the work plan, make sure that they are included in one activity line as well. Often we do suggest a timeline of, since RTP is a 2-year grant, to spend that first year in the 2026 field season focusing on permitting, doing those final planning stages and bidding process, and then in year 2 in 2027, really working on that construction completion piece. So what's next? We do have a sample grant agreement up on our website. If you have any questions or are curious to take a look at that, definitely check that out. The guidance, the pre-application guidance will be your go-to guide for everything we've covered in this webinar and the prior webinar. We will also often send it to you as a guide if you have questions. So definitely spend some time checking that out if you have any questions. A few tips about the guidance itself. Next slide, please, Lauren. There are some orange boxes. Those are just calling out examples. gray boxes are some tips and key information. So make sure you're paying attention to those. And then also, Lauren, as she mentioned, there are examples of the work plan and budget at the end of this document too. And then if you have any questions, please do reach out to our team. Joe, Lauren, and I all are in this A&R FPR Recreation Grants inbox. So you will get an email from one of us for sure. That is your best way to reach out to us with questions. We also do have some office hours coming up in November. This is your time to bring questions to us, and we can answer them and work through them live with you. Registration links should be on the website, but we'll also send out some reminders for those as well. And then the last piece is just a reminder, pre-apps are due Friday, November 21st at 11:59 p.m. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. And I think that's moving on to Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Marlena, for covering that section. There are some requests in the chat for the link to the DAT guidance, the sample grant agreement, and the pre-application guidance, I think are the ones we have not yet resolved. Thank you, everyone. I decided to stop pulling links because I realized I was making things blink on you. I'm sorry about that, as I'm queuing up for the Q&A to help support. The first one I want to come back to for the Q&A before we launch into is the budget. And there was a question around budget flexibility. So this is what I just wanted to pull up the actual template to help explain it a bit more, which is why you were seeing my downloads folder as things were popping between the screens. So this is the budget form that we have for RTP this year. And so when you're submitting your pre-application and your full application, we want individual line items. This helps you build your case, really explain your project, tell the review committee who we will go over that in the full application webinars, how that works. But like, guess what? We don't make the decisions. We're the ones who actually are putting it all together saying, yep, this is there, or here we have it. It is eligible, and we set it up, and then they review the criteria. So that is how that works. But with the budgets, when we go to the grant agreement development phase, right? Like your project has been selected for funding, it has been authorized by the Federal Highway Administration, and then we're ready to make a grant agreement, which is a legal contract between your entity and FPR about the project, right? It confirms the money that you are guaranteed for that work, so long as you do the work that is outlined, as well as all the various legal terms and conditions. So when we write the budgets for grant agreements, and I think this is an important thing to note, is we will pull only these subtotal lines together to look at that. And so you're like, oh, there's all my construction maintenance projects together. We're going to go, yes, you had $50,000 for construction maintenance. That is what's in your budget in the grant agreement, is whatever that line is. If you have multiple lines, you can pull those out together to be able to have, we'll pull each of the one that you have information on together. But we are only looking at subtotals for the grant agreement development. And the reason we do this is on purpose. And it is to give you as much flexibility as possible if you are selected for funding to actually implement your project successfully, knowing that at this point, everything is an estimate. And even beyond that, we have information available. It's there online that helps to give some examples. But as Joe was mentioning in the chat, I just wanted to pull this out a little bit more. We allow up to 25% change between any of the budget lines, which are going to be the subtotal categories, without any permission from us, right? So if you're like, ooh, construction has gone up just a little bit, so I'm going to take that out of admin. Or admin was more expensive than we thought, and so we're going to take that out of our construction requests because we're going to do more with volunteers and less with contractors. You can make those adjustments on the fly for the expenses. You can have up to 25%. If any single line item, again, which are going to be by the categories like A, B, C, D, E, F, as specified in your grant agreement, if any of those move by more than 25%, that is what trips an amendment process, and we evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. So to answer your question, yes, there is budget flexibility built in, and it varies depending on what the steps and the requirements would be. So I think that was Sarah who had those questions about that. Sarah, does that answer everything there? Okay, good, we got that one. Now at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and maybe ask for assistance from Marlena about anything in the chat to get to next.
Yes. So Jillian just asked, if submitting an application for the planning track, how detailed should this application be? What are some of the key features that you will be looking for in a planning track application?
Right. So it's a pre-application. If you're going for planning track, if you are planning track, you do those 3 core materials. So we're looking for the pre-application form, the work plan, and the budget. Because we want to know those steps of what you have. The space for like, what will this planning project result in? Tell us more at the end. That is going to be for the full application phase that we skim through this. But if you're going to tell us, and really what we're looking for is eligibility, right? To make sure that what you're planning, the end product of that is a fit for RTP, because planning track funding should be used for a project that could in the future be fundable by RTP. So if you're going to tell me we're doing our planning track funding in your work plan, and you're like, the end product will be a pool design, we'll be like, that is a very lovely project and not eligible for RTP, right? Because RTP doesn't fund swimming pools. And so your work plan, your budget, and that form are going to be what you use. The full application phase is when you're going to tell us a lot more about like, what is the plan, why this plan, why this trail, what is the design work that needs to be done, all of those pieces. So hopefully that helps, Jillian. Is the planning tracks it is a slimmed down one, but again, like our check is for like project readiness, feasibility, and eligibility. So we're looking for things like all your activities are within the allowed time window, all the costs are eligible, those sorts of pieces. You make your case in the full application.
Great. We just got another question in the chat. Brett asked, how detailed does the brief project description need to be? Since it's only 150 words, what are you looking for?
Yeah, that is one I am also rapidly pulling things up so I can show you the example from the pre-application guidance, actually, to be able to pull it up, because we've given an example for that. So what we're looking for in this project description is something you can think about it as the overview. It is the like elevator pitch of what is this project. Just like help us wrap our brains around like what is happening. So I know this is probably tiny. I'll zoom in on it. So this project, what we want to know is like, what are you planning to do? Where is it, in a high level overview of like why it has happening. So I'll just read off the one that we have here. You know, the town of Anywhere plans to build a new 6-foot wide engineered metal bridge over the Smith Creek on the Fun Times Trail in the Anywhere Municipal Forest. The new bridge will replace a 2-foot wide wooden bridge that is rotting with a larger one that is more resilient to high water events and safer for trail users. We're looking for like that high level snapshot of like, what is this project about? You will have so much space in the full application for everyone to tell us like all the value of your project. Like those are the pieces. This is like our crosswalk of when we see your project, we're like, what is this about? Okay, we know what it's about. So when we go in to look at your work plan, we go to look at your budget, we can look at that project. Because if you tell me you're doing a bridge replacement project, but it's not construction, we're going to have questions about that, right? Like that is the piece, is we're going to look at that to be like, right, that is obviously a construction project. So good, you have your design assessment tool, you have your permanent navigator, and you have your map. Check. We're using that as a quality control just to put those pieces together. But that's all we're looking for, is that high level description. Great. Are there any other questions, Marlena, in the chat that you're seeing?
I'm not seeing, but if I missed any from earlier, please do let me know. But I think we covered everything.
Okay. Are there any other questions that folks have today?
Yeah, just very quickly, sorry to come back on the planning track, but if construction is involved, right, do we have to go through in terms of the requirements for the construction in the planning track?
If the work that you are proposing in the planning track is only for planning, and then like down the road in another grant, in another project, that is when the construction will happen, then no, your fundamental work is only planning and permitting. We do not need any of the construction maintenance activities. If you're saying, well, we're going to develop the plan and we're going to build the plan together at the same time, right? We're going to do the final trail design and the permitting, and then we're going to build the trail. We would actually say that's a standard, like those combo projects. If you're submitting one submission that's going to include both phases, that should actually go in the standard RTP track. So planning is for planning only, but we look at that scope as not construction, because like at the end of this grant, you will not have done any groundbreaking or anything like that. Does that answer your question, Jillian?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, you're welcome. It looks like I see a question in the chat from Shelly about maps. Yes, Shelly, take us away on maps. What are your questions?
Well, a couple. We're looking at improving some rolling grade dips. It's about 1,500 feet of trail. So on the map, a line just saying we're putting in 16 rolling grade dips, or I have waypoints for all the rolling grade dips. So what would be the preference there as far as, like a dot for a waypoint or just a line, overlaying the trail? I guess how detailed, it's like.
I understand that question. And that is actually one of the reasons why we're asking for maps in the pre-application phase this year, so that we can look at your maps when we get them and just say, this is great. Or we can tell you, this is too granular, we can't understand it. Or vice versa, this is not detailed enough, please let us know. So like that is the piece. And so it's hard to say like universally, right? Because 16 dots may cross 6 different trails across the network in all these different places, and may even be on different landowners' properties. Like we have seen maps before, in which case like 16 map dots is really, really, really good. Like, because we need to be able to check all those places. Okay, 3 rolling grade drips, we're on this trail, 3 we're on this trail, 6 we're over here. That's really helpful. Like to go back to our example here, you could see this whole section. We were like, this little blip is where trail tread maintenance is, right? It's fundamentally all the same compacted area on the same trail with the same landowner. You can put that together that way. So it just depends a little bit on the circumstances of your project. And if you're like, yeah, I know where all of them are going to be, you're welcome to put them all on there. So I would just say it's a little bit back and forth that way. It depends on the circumstance. Like if it crosses multiple trails, multiple landowners, everything like that, like put them in different places. In this one, you could see we have 2 kiosks. So like each kiosk has a point because they're different, and it's visible where they are different and why they're there. And like, this is it's a screenshot. So it's a low resolution, but depending on your tools, like we've also gotten maps from grantees who are working with professional contractors where you have to zoom into like the teensy tiny box on this, like they zoom really hard. They're really large file size. So as long as we can zoom in and out, that also works too, depending on your preference and what you have. Does that answer it, Shelley, for you?
Well, that one. And then
okay.
My other question is map extents. All right. So every time you want to see if your project fits on that 11 by 17 piece of paper, I have to go to print. Right. So is there a way when I'm actually working on the computer in A&R Atlas, I can figure out where that extent is that I want to be without, because I might be able to zoom in a little bit more to maybe get it all on one map, but I'm really thinking I'm going to probably need 2 maps just because the length to show the overall trail connects 3 communities. Not that we're doing work in those other communities, but I want to show the overall length of the trail of where it goes to, just not outer space. So that's my question there is, do I just have to hit the print button every time I want to see my shaded box?
You do, unfortunately, with A&R Atlas, okay. That is the piece. You have to do that as a size. And it just depends, as I said, it depends on the tool. Like if you're using A&R Atlas, you're also welcome to give us a couple of maps together. Like you are allowed to submit more than one map. If like that is, because you could be like, this is part A and part B, as long as we can tell like each of the maps has all of the things in the checklist, which generally if you're using A&R Atlas, it will, so long as you label your features. As long as you have that, it's okay. so you can do multiple maps if you're like, cool, I really want to zoom in on this section and then this section over here, because there's work in each of them. You're welcome to do that.
And then I'm assuming, let's say I have map A and map B. So then in the work plan, the trails that I have listed in the work plan that are on map A, I should have in the work plan, see map A for.
We
Yeah,
love when
okay.
that happens. When we're like, we can tell which map it's on. Yes, that is lovely when we can crosswalk those materials together. Yes.
Okay, great. Hey
And
guys,
even
thanks
if it's
very
not
much.
CMAP A, if you're like, it's clearly labeled as, you know, the Fun Times Trail
Right.
on map A, then we will see that Fun Times Trail is on map A.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks very much, you guys. Appreciate everything.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, I'm seeing some questions coming in the chat. We have a question from Diana about the coalitions putting in, or teams like volunteers together with a nonprofit. Diana, do you want to come off mute and ask your question a little bit more of what you're looking for with that?
Sure. I recall from the first workshop that there were 3 categories of people who could make application. And
Yes.
I don't fall into one of those 3. We're
Yeah.
a volunteer task force without any ability to receive money or disseminate money, but we are able to do the work of submitting a grant. And we have a nonprofit that would like to partner with us.
Yes.
Is our group of enthusiastic volunteers willing to do the work of submitting a grant able to do that in collaboration with a nonprofit who would then receive and disseminate the funds?
Yes, that is allowed. For the sake of the pre-application form, the applying entity would be the nonprofit.
Gotcha.
Right. So like that, because they would be the applicant, like they're the ones who would have the potential to sign that agreement with us and get the grant. I don't think it's in the pre-application form, but in the full application, there is a space to say, is this a coalition project? Yes or no? And if yes, explain who else is involved. So that is a space there, because we'll have, you know, like a nonprofit that is sometimes it's truly a partnership. Sometimes they're just serving as a fiscal sponsor for a group that would be otherwise ineligible. Different relationships for different nonprofits or municipalities. So sometimes it's a fiscal sponsor, sometimes it's a partnership, but there is a space within there. So the answer is yes, so long as there's ultimately a municipality, a nonprofit, or another governmental entity, which would be the one who would get the grant.
Okay, great. And do you have a sense of which is preferable to work with, if we had an option of going with a nonprofit or falling under the town umbrella?
That I cannot advise. From our perspective as administrators of the RTP program, we don't say, oh, well, we have a town quota and a nonprofit quota, so like it would make a difference. Like, no, we're just like, you're eligible, check. And after that point, it is about your relationships and your financial management within that, and like your partnerships.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All
Brett
right,
also has a question. Yes, should we include different phases of the project that would be covered in future projects, since this grant only covers a portion of the whole project?
It is up to you, Brett, if you want to spell that out in certain ways. And so sometimes, like we have seen, it would be the work plan would be the space where you call that out. So definitely not in your budget. Do not put future phases in your budget, please. Only RTP funded costs in the budget and the match. But the work plan would be the space where you could choose to do that. And so you could say that, you know, like you have all your detailed steps for your RTP project. We've also seen ones at like the very end after that, they'll say phase 2 and then give a high level overview of phase 2, phase 3, high level overview of phase 3, so that the ranking committee could understand how this piece fits into the broader scheme. But we don't recommend you spend a lot of time and effort like distilling to a granular level of work plan steps those future phases, because it is for that future work. So it saves you time. So it's an opportunity to share your story of how it fits in, if that is applicable. But we don't want you to like really break it down to be like this exact nuanced pieces, because that's just not the best use of your time. Because as you said, it is that would be a future project. Does that hopefully help your answer, Brad? All right. Well, as we've shared before, we are readily available via email to answer questions. So if you do have further questions after this session that you want to keep going with, we're happy to field those questions. Or if there's like a custom situation via email, or we've got 2 more sessions. These first 2 have been like us sharing information to you. The next 2 office hours are really just us hopping on live to answer questions in real time. So happy to continue to troubleshoot those and brainstorm with you all through those sessions. But other than that, good luck as you continue your pre-applications, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.